choices within the ANC is no longer between devils and angels. The angels have long gone. Today, we make choices between the devil and the deep blue sea. And we choose the deep blue sea because at least we can try and swim our way or wait for a lifeboat. So Ramaphosa is not in the realm of the angelic. I believe that the president has an ethical case to answer for.
Everybody, hello. This is Oli Mueng at WorldView. This is a place where we explore everyone's perspective on things that can broaden our worldview. Many of you know that the African National Congress, the governing party in South Africa for very soon 30 years, 28, 29, 30, has just gone through another elective conference where they went on to elect new leadership at all levels of the party, including president, from president, NEC, the top 7, which used to be top 6. They've just added another position, I think, to create a job for somebody. We'll hear about that. and the NEC, I've just been going through the list, and of all the old people, some of them should have been somewhere else, at home, retired, or in prison, who knows, or in jail, or in the courts. But anyway, I have my favorite ANC person in front of me here, Ebrahim Rasool, former ambassador of South Africa to Washington, former premier of the Western Cape, former chairman of Western Province Professional Rugby. This is a man of all, and he also travels the world talking about peace, about reconciliation, about working together across divides. He's an amazing man. I mean, you should spend an hour with Ebrahim Rasool. You'd like think, what did I not do it before? Ebrahim Rasool, good morning.
Good morning, Saleh. Nice to speak to you again, and thanks very much to the viewers of WorldView.
Thank you. Thanks for accepting to do this. I know that you came back from Joburg late last night. You had spent the past 3 or 4 days at ANC conference, surrounded by lots of people, famous and not famous, loud and quiet, noisy. Some of them were singing also songs going in different directions, but it appears like in the end, the stream seemed to be facing the same direction after the initial tumultuous days, especially with the arrival of Jacob Zuma. Apparently that caused a bit of chaos while the president was speaking. What do you make of it all?
Look, I think that this conference is the decisive one. And it's very difficult for people outside of the ANC to understand just what angst and what emotion is in it. The ANC finds itself at multiple crossroads. And the reaction to it is no different to reactions to existential crises that I have seen in the Muslim world, that I've seen in apartheid South Africa, that I've seen anywhere. And the point that I'm making is that for the first time ever, I believe in 110 years, the ANC is facing a moral crisis, which could be the precursor to an existential crisis. The ANC in its history has had strategic crises. Should we do the armed struggle or not? It has had political crises. Can we keep an Africanist movement within us or not? It has had an organizational crisis. How do you run an organization when half of its leaders are in exile, the other half on Robben Island, and the other half underground? And so it has had ideological crises. For example, when the Berlin Wall fell, what do we do with our socialist rhetoric now that communism has collapsed? But the ANC has never, ever had a moral crisis because people always believed it was right, even if they did not like it.
Right.
And now suddenly you face this.
Just a minute, when you say people, you're talking about people outside of the ANC or people inside the ANC?
I'm saying that whether you were Ronald Reagan in the White House arming the apartheid government, you knew that the ANC was right.
Okay.
Whether you were the apartheid government, you knew that your racial policies were unsustainable and that the ANC was right.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you were a black person who were dismayed that civilians got killed in Silverton, but you always had a sense that the ANC was right and that must be an aberration.
But I mean, it was the ANC alongside other liberation movement. It wasn't the only liberation movement, right?
No, absolutely. But I think the topic is the 55th conference of the ANC.
Right. Okay.
And so this moral crisis means that the ANC is no longer divided between left and right. The ANC today is divided between right and wrong. And that is the fundamental outcome of it. And if the wrong elements are given more oxygen, it leads from a moral crisis to an existential crisis, because then the question is, will the ANC exist? But the more important question is, should the ANC exist?
Do people inside the ANC understand that?
I think there is at least now 55% to 60% of the ANC that understands it. And they understand it from two perspectives. They understand it from the perspective of what are the values of the ANC to which we must return. How have the Zuma crowd and the corrupt within the ANC perverted our fundamental values? How have they brought us to this moral and existential crisis? But the other part of that ANC that voted for Cyril Ramaphosa over the last few days are also survivalists, because the ANC was presented with statistics and polling data and survey outcomes that said that if the ANC is not seen to be acting, it will be out of government in 2024. So there's two ways that people come to God. It is through values and belief, and on the other hand, it is through a sense of survival.
Right.
And we need that sense of survival if we are going to salvage the best of what the ANC was historically and what it could be. But everyone knows that there is no silver bullet, that sometimes we need to coexist simply and increasingly. Renewal must also mean purification. So what I'm saying is that the president of the ANC and the country, President Ramaphosa, has for 5 years, because of balance of forces, tried to reconcile right and wrong. And every time he makes a gesture, he doesn't deal with the head of intelligence. It comes to bite him in the backside, because that same guy that he side-shifted releases Jacob Zuma from prison and launches a Palapala scandal against him.
Well, I mean, he laid charges, but he didn't imagine, he didn't create Palapala. It happened. We must still deal with it, really.
What I'm saying is, I didn't say I said he launched it against him. I'm not saying it didn't exist or that he made it up.
Right.
Secondly, he thinks he can manage ministers within his cabinet. And what do those ministers do? They vote for his impeachment.
Yeah.
So he's now learned a very difficult personal lesson for his own growth, I think, that appeasement appears weak, and you sometimes need to find within you the steel to deal with the wrong elements decisively, and rather go to a glorious death than to live the kind of whimpering life that I think we have seen over the last 5 years.
Do you think where he's sitting now, he thinks the way you do right now about these things? Is he going to come out stronger or firmer people tend to describe him as a president with no backbone for everything you just said. I mean, do you think he's coming out to say, you know what, I can't let this happen to me anymore. This is where I'm going to take a firm line on certain things. Is it what we're going to see in him?
Look, whether he has it within himself. Remember, this is the president who had a toolbox. Right. When he was a mining boss, he negotiated. We hailed him for that same toolbox when he negotiated the National Party out of power. We hailed him for that same toolbox when he negotiated the new constitution and the Bill of Rights, and the world rejoiced because this was the most progressive constitution. He could be forgiven for thinking that that is a valid toolbox when you're dealing with a moral crisis of the ANC. And that's why I'm saying this has to be a moment of personal growth, but we can't depend on him because we know that he can't be the Messiah. But what we have given him is a top 6 that is not perfect. It is flawed. A top 7, I must say.
It's very flawed.
It includes elements in there, but not to the same majority that it was over the last 5 years. So he's got something to work with. But more importantly, we now need to put that head that we elected on a backbone of 80 people, the majority of which must be committed to the renewal of the ANC and the revival of the country. And that, I think, is the outcome that we are waiting with bated breath.
The thing that worries me that we've spent as a country some billions or so on the Zondo Commission. The Zondo Commission has delivered its report. It's public. It is very, very clear, the recommendations of that are in there. Of course, the president is not going to go around preparing dockets and arresting people. The National Prosecutions Authority must do that. The police, the Hawks must do all of that stuff. What worries me is that the president, because in the current system, he's deployed by the African National Congress, he has to sit with his comrades in whether NEC or NEC to say, okay, guys, we need to show South Africans that we're doing something about this, or at least we're releasing the resources for the NPA to do what it must. But some of the people in the room, and I'm sure they're not going to be asked to recuse themselves, are people who should be in the courts, who should be in jail, who should never be in public office.
Look, Sole, I think that at the end of the day, the money we spend on Zondo is worthwhile. I think that prosecutions have started, that the former Secretary General of the ANC is in court, the former head of Northwest is in court. I think that at the political level, Jacob Zuma is facing his day in court and running and scuttling around like anything. But more importantly, the foot soldiers of corruption, the middle management and the top management of SOEs are in court, the Brian Molefis, the Machelo Kokos, etc., etc. So I do think that there is action. But
Malusi Gigaba is number 2 on the NEC list.
I think we are waiting to get to those kind of points. And you see, I heard a very beautiful expression the other day. And it describes the state that we're in. When you fight corruption, corruption fights back.
Yeah, that's true.
And what we have seen over the last while is corruption fighting back. A desperate attempt to impeach a president so that some can't go to jail. The prosecutions can be altered. A desperate attempt to seize power electorally at the ANC's 55th conference so that the renewal forces can't proceed and that the corrupt take charge of the ANC again. We have seen any number, an attempt to storm on the first day the stage in order to collapse the conference. I think we have seen all of that, and the conference really only calmed down after the top 7 was elected.
Right.
And then there was a sense of not resignation, but there was a sense of quiet and disarray within those forces, because they now begin to contemplate, if they don't win the next 80, they could well be facing. The strategic challenge for the state is, do we have the resources, the human and capital resources, to go after everyone implicated, or do we take the commanding heights and put them in front of the courts? Secondly, can we rely on the state prosecutors to do this, or do we continue? And already 25 million has been set aside to hire legal brains from the private sector to come and do some of these prosecutions. So a lot of things are in place.
But Nomvula Okonyane should never be there. I mean, like, this woman is like, it's like so not the South Africa we want to build. She doesn't belong there.
That's exactly the problem. But the fact of the matter that what could remove her is if the NPA now moves to charge her.
Yeah.
And the same with many others. So I think they all know the fact that there's one or two out of seven that is under a cloud. It's a reality in which we may have to, for the moment, hug the hyena in order to get the overall situation in place.
Okay, let's hug the hyena. We've been hugging the hyena for too long, but hey, we never know.
No, we have.
Maybe patience is a
That's
virtue.
the
Maybe
problem.
patience is indeed a virtue. I mean, it's a good thing to know that. I mean, and you're not saying it directly, but I think you're saying, look, the NPA, which is a different body of state, must do what it must, and these people might be in the tent with us. When the NPA comes knocking on the door, asking for them, we're not going to shield them. The NPA must be allowed to do what it must. It's up to Patohi and her team to do what they must for South Africa, not for the ANC.
I can tell you, Solly, that if the top 7 results had gone the other way, and if the next 80 goes wrong, I can tell you that the desire to recall the president of the ANC as president of the country will be very strong.
Right.
I can tell you that the desire to subvert the work of the law in the same way that Jacob Zuma's first priority when he became president was to collapse the Scorpions and to put Sean Abrams in as head of the NPA, remove Anwar Dramat, etc., etc. I am telling you, we have seen this movie. That is what would have happened if the results go the wrong way.
Yeah, but you see, the thing in South Africa, it's important that we face things for what they are. The Scorpios were undone. The undoing of the Scorpios happened during Halima Motlante's acting presidency. Jacob Zuma was not yet president. Sure, he was already president of the ANC, but the ANC decided this. The ANC elected Nomvula Mokunya. The ANC elected all these people who should be this. The ANC said, go on and do the Scorpio. The ANC said, go out and find advocate Butipikoli. And Mutlante is now walking around like a sage. But this man actually is almost also at the source of the dangers we are facing as a country.
I can tell you that interim period between Polokwane 2007 and the installation of Kgalema Motlanthe as president of the ANC and the eventual rise of Jacob Zuma as president from the 2009 election was indeed the period. But by that time, Polokwane had elected an ANC under Jacob Zuma, and Motlanthe was the proxy for what had happened there. So, and I know it because I had been the first victim of Polokwane when they removed me as premier of the Western Cape. And then they removed Thabo Mbeki as president of the country in order to remove any obstacles to the collapse of the Scorpions. And I think a lot of what Motlanthe is trying to do, his pronouncement now, these what you call the saintly pronouncements, it's an elaborate attempt to atone for what he had been instrumentalized.
No, but he must apologize. I'm sorry. No. He must say to South Africans, you know what? I was wrong to do that. I should have said no. You know, many people in the ANC, respected people in the ANC, have said no, and they've paid it because they said the South Africa is important. Motlanthe can't atone by giving us ice cream. He must say, I'm facing up to this. I was wrong to do this. Even Mbeki suspended Vusipikoli just to protect his body, who was corrupt, who was captured, a police commissioner. These people can't just walk around now with their gray hair and look saintly. They must apologize because they started the rot.
I think that's a debate you must have with him.
Yeah.
I have paid my price for going to Polokwane and voting against Jacob Zuma. But the point that I'm making is that corruption has at least 3 elements. There's the perpetrator, there's the enabler, and then there is the one who gave permission through silence.
There's a victim. Us, we're all the victims of it.
But I'm speaking about those who are guilty of corruption.
Okay.
Those are 3 categories.
Sure. So the perpetrator, the enabler, and the one.
And the silent one.
The silent one, correct. Yes. Sometimes we enable things by being silent, right? By being quiet.
Yes. They were at the scene of the crime.
Yeah. So what were your key moments during this conference that has just taken place? What were the times where, maybe give us the highs and the lows for yourself, for Ebrahim, when you said, you know what, I'm still proud to be here. And the moment when you said, oh God, this is not what I signed up for.
You see, my key moment was to be chosen as part of a delegation of veterans of the ANC, people who have longer histories in struggle than what I have. And we have called out those veterans for one possible last fight to salvage our collective legacy of noble, graceful struggle in the midst of all of that. Sitting every day with them in a special area set aside for the veterans was for me an affirmation that the memory of the ANC is not just the Zuma decade. The memory of the ANC is about Mandela, Tambo, Lutuli, etc., etc. It is about Chris Hani and everyone else. So in a sense, I needed to be with them to be reminded that indeed most of the 100 of the 110 years was sacrifice and struggle and nobility and grace. I think, and that means with them, we needed to play a role in this conference. And that's why we sent out statements reminding of the values and calling to correction those who rubbish the names of people who sing antagonistic songs, etc., and sully the entire 110 years. And so for me, this is not about falling again as a loyal and disciplined member of the ANC. No, the ANC doesn't need discipline and loyalty from people like ourselves now. It needs dissidents, loyal dissidents, that we need to speak up. We need to say what is wrong. We need to salvage the memory of a Mandela and a Tambo and a Lutuli, etc., etc. And so for me, that was very important. And to some extent, not completely, as I said, happiness is not the benchmark anymore. There must be just a degree of satisfaction that we have a little bit of traction to fight back.
Yeah.
And when that top 7 was announced, and knowing how tempting it must have been for ordinary ANC members who are by and large poor to go home and have a Christmas with a leg of lamb because they were given 2,000 Rand, but knowing that about 60% or 56%, which was the president's majority, that about 56% of the ANC still resisted temptation.
Just a minute, so each one of the delegates was given 2,000 rands?
No. That was what we've heard was on offer to people who would vote against the president.
Wow. Okay. Where does the money come from? The 2,000 rands for so many people. Okay.
I remind you of the point, when you fight corruption, corruption fights back.
That's
and
true.
It will use some of its proceeds in the fight back.
Yeah.
And so that gives me a sense that not that we have hope for a glorious ANC again. I think that has gone. I think it gives me a sense that we can have a fight back against the fight.
Yeah, but I mean, the ANC, thank you. The ANC is limping right now. And you say it, the president used to have this moral high ground, this Ramaphosa, that people used to just love this man. And when he smiles, he still has it himself. He knows how to walk the talk, and to smile, to charm, to hug, to walk, and to joke about himself. And he's an amazing man. But Palapala has hurt him big time. Morally speaking, reputationally speaking, because this thing might have been dealt with politically in parliament. It's still going through the courts. We don't know where it's going. I mean, he still has to tell us how money got to be on his farm, in the way where was tax paid for that money, were the laws broken when it was brought into the country, was it accounted for, all that stuff. I mean, and also there are allegations and proof that was shown that he had been actively involved in running his company, when the law is clear that in his position he's not supposed to be involved in his companies. So all of that stuff still has to be ventilated.
Look, I think that, again, let me introduce another catchphrase that I've been using. Choices within the ANC is no longer between devils and angels. The angels have long gone. Today, we make choices between the devil and the deep blue sea. And we choose the deep blue sea because at least we can try and swim our way or wait for a lifeboat. So Ramaphosa is not in the realm of the angelic. I believe that the president has an ethical case to answer for. Whether he has a legal case, SARS will resolve that by saying, we fine you this. The Reserve Bank must decide whether the Forex came in correctly. Was it indeed declared at OR Tambo Airport, etc., etc. So those are the things. But fundamentally, if you look at the devil and the deep blue sea, the one stole from us and the other one was stolen from.
Yeah, but just a minute, let's tell you, I know that, but the things, the laws are the laws, the laws. I mean, you can explain your law. I clapped him, or I punched him, or I stepped him. You still broke the law. You assaulted somebody, right? Of course, one should never compare, say, Palapala with Nkandla. I know that many people are trying to put the two at the same level. They are not.
No, and that has been the big. Has been the big argument of the when corruption fights back. We are all equal.
Yeah, no, they're not. I'm telling them they're not. Ramaphosa is not being accused of having stolen South African money, and that's kudos to him for that. But I think that he failed when he played hide and seek on the Palapala thing. That is a pity, because now the more you do that as a brand, the more people ask questions. People ask, what is he hiding? And that's the thing. And then it takes away the moral high ground. So these people who are trying to put him at the same level as Nkandla are not going to stop. As you say, corruption will hold on to anything to just make him look as bad as they are. But I think he should have done a much better job in that.
Listen, Solly, the ethical dilemma or crisis for the president is that when you become president, and I know it because I became premier, you put your businesses in a blind trust and you know nothing about it until the day you are no longer president.
Right. Yeah.
He knew too much about his business and he has to answer for that. But at the end of the day, there is no moral high ground. We are all on the moral trough. Secondly, there is no equivalence between one versus the other. That's a trope that the RET forces are trying. And certainly, I think the president must answer for what he has done. But I would rather have a flawed president starting the process, and then the law must take its course with him, and that's what we are about.
So as things stand, Paul Mashatile might become president should anything happen to Ramaphosa. I mean, do you think he'll be a good president? Because he also has all sorts of stuff happening. He used to be described as the Alexander Mafia. He's all sorts of stuff used to come out of that man. He's no angel. I mean, the ANC keeps churning these people onto South Africa. South Africa is a victim here. The ANC doesn't seem to think about what's good for South Africa. It's like, what's good? How do we stay together? How do we keep our movement strong, irrespective of what the price South Africa has to pay? The South Africa has been like an abuse partner in this house for too long. Surely, come on, guys.
No, absolutely, and it's not true. I think that up till 12 years ago, the ANC gave of its best. You had the erudite Kada Asmal, the upright Dalla Umar, you had the Chris Hani, the Joe Slovo. I think we did give of our best. I
agree.
We are dealing with an aberration that started at Polokwane, and that the balance of forces and so I've also said that the renewal of the ANC is also about the purification, and part of that purification must be that we have to re-people the ANC. The worst that could have happened was Jacob Zuma launching the 1 million member campaign. And that was against what Thabo Mbeki had introduced at the ANC National Conference about better, fewer, but better. Quality comes numbers. Jacob Zuma came in, turned it around, launched a 1 million member campaign. They largely came from KwaZulu-Natal, and they were largely former IFP people that were recruited in, and they brought their warlordism and everything into it, combined with a tribalism that we had not seen in the ANC before. And so the ANC was effectively re-peopled away from the nobility of that. You know, when I came to Polokwane and I saw from the Eastern Cape, the old gogos with their dukes and the old guys with their blankets around it versus the youthful delegation from KZN, and I was horrified because there were no ethics. There was no ethic of disagreement. There was no way in which they even allowed people to speak from then I knew that our million members had resulted into a quantity, but had significantly decreased the quality of who we traditionally were. So you are right. We gave the worst to South Africa in the last few administrations.
Yeah.
And maybe the way to claw back is going to be absolute, because another casualty of giving the worst is the casualty of non-racialism.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's really what has happened. And people like myself have to fight for those old values of the ANC.
Yeah, but the leader, Ramaphosa is the leader. He needs to, don't forget that. He needs to stand up and remind South Africans, this is who we are, we the people, not the ANC. I mean, the ANC is part of it, of course. But South Africa is a pained nation. You know, the diversity needs to be nurtured all the time by a leader who reminds us, no matter what happens, we are in it together. Let's build this thing together. But some of the laws do make it hard. I mean, when you have a white child who comes from a poor family who gets told you can't get this because you're white, it's not cool. I mean, because of what happened during apartheid. When you say to a white child, you're starting a business, well, you need BE, you need to give percentage to a black child. We need to bring up a black generation of humans that believe in themselves, that can create stuff, that don't need to be given percentages by what taking away from others in order to develop black skills and black development, black economy. It's not good. I mean, we need to get to a point where we say, let's create an environment where South African humans, irrespective of what they look like, will be supported, where they have an amazing talent and potential. Let's give them what they must to be the best for South Africa, for the country, for Africa, for the world. But we're not doing that. I mean, we need to move away from race at some point.
No, look, the point of the matter is that part of the justice that we must have is restorative justice. So we can't be smooth and say that there's no process of restoration that needs to take place. But what we have seen is, under the guise of radical economic transformation, of radical affirmative action, of radical black economic empowerment, we have not given it to poor blacks. We have given it to the favorites, the family, the owners of the president, etc., etc. Those are the ones who have bought the coal mines, been given the mining licenses, and then sell inferior coal to Eskom. That creates the kind of crisis that we have. So what I'm saying is, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. The baby of restorative justice must be preserved, but the dirty bathwater that has paraded as radical economic transformation, I think must be called for what it is. It is not transformation. It is the weaponization of the restorative justice that we all seek.
What do you think would happen if South Africa had a system that said, okay, let's take race out of all policies, all right? Let's look at South Africa in 2022. This is not 1994, 2022, and a lot of young South Africans have left this country because they felt they don't belong. Not just white, colored boys and girls in India have left South Africa. Because we don't. If you go to the Western Cape, you speak to a lot of colored people who say we are being excluded. We're not white enough. We're not black enough. That's the truth. We can't pretend not to hear these things forever. So we need to. What if we came up with a system that said, let us take care of all South Africans, every South African, irrespective of what. Most people who are going to benefit anyway are going to be black because of the sheer number of black people in South Africa. Do you have to discriminate against the ever-shrinking minority in order to please the ever-growing majority? Or do you say, let's take care of everyone? Most people who will benefit are black because of the sheer numbers, surely.
So Solly, I think it's going to be difficult, given the persistent disparities which are color-coded in South Africa, to take the concept of race out of our discourse.
But we haven't here because of the ANC.
But what we need to take out of our discourse is racism.
Right.
It is because, we can be forgiven for our prejudices, but we can never be forgiven for our discrimination. We can be forgiven for our for our fear of the other, but we can never be forgiven for ignorance about the other. And so the point is, and You were my favorite columnist when I was premier, but that's because I found resonance with the idea of making the Western Cape a home for all, and then making a bargain with the people of the Western Cape that our socioeconomic strategy would be based on Ikapa Eliglumayo, the Cape that we grow and share. You don't share without growth, and you can't grow without sharing. You can't, if you don't grow, you are taking from someone else who has. But if you grow, we make sure that the proceeds are distributed. And I think that that's the thoughtfulness that we need to bring in, so that racism is removed and race becomes increasingly less visible in our lexicon, because there is a growing sense of we are part, we are included, we are looked after, someone is making an effort, and the best distribution is to make sure that services go to people. People's desires aren't much. The thing that stands between the ANC and oblivion today is the fact that every month pensions, grants, and disability gets paid. The thing that stands between people, the ANC and oblivion, is the fact that something that's never happened before, dirt gets collected, that there are some roads, that there's an electricity connection, that there's a water connection. That stands. People want to know, why do these stupid blacks still vote for the ANC? It's because those were the basic things that were denied people, and that's keeping the ANC alive. And if the ANC can use that to reimagine itself out of the last 2 decades, then I believe that we can get back to an ANC that isn't obsessed by race, and will not be seduced into racism by an EFF or the RET forces within it.
But when we have, I mean, you've talked about blemished people, reputationally speaking, like Nomvula Mukanyan in the leadership, it almost will slow down the speed with which the ANC, an emerging ANC, could, or re-emerging, reloaded ANC, could do those things that you're describing. I mean, I, as a South African, when I look at people like Malusi Gigaba, Nomvula Mukunyane, and all those others in there, I said, God, it's the same thing. I mean, it doesn't give me pride. I used to be a supporter of the ANC too. That most people, I grew up in Deep Close Soweto. I used to vote the ANC. I used to love you as a premier. I mean, I still love you now, even when you're the premier. but I mean, the ANC has become a monster. You know what I'm saying? I cannot imagine myself supporting a party that says it's okay to put people like those into serious positions of public influence.
You know, Solly, every organization is a licorice all sorts. But the flavors in there that you hate must be so few that you can still enjoy buying that product. If the flavors are overwhelming, like it was in the ANC over the last 10, 15 years, then people must not buy that product. So I can live with a Nomvula until legal processes take. I can even find Paul Mashatile more palatable. But I must know that the others in that top 7 are not being dominated by them, and that the president must show us. And this is the test. I'm telling you what the ordinary test is within the ANC and outside the ANC for the president. Will he fire Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, and will he fire Lindiwe Sisulu? That's the acid test that I think people are putting to the president. If he shows us his backbone on that, we can believe him on many other things.
But I would say I mean, if he fights them, he must fight them for, especially Lindiwe Sisulu, who's been going out and saying also these nasty things about him in public, because I mean she's part of his cabinet. But they shouldn't be fired because they stood up and said no. On this point, the party is wrong, the country is right. Of course, they had also political ulterior motives. That's why it's so difficult for some of us, because you stand with the people who are actually just defending wrong, but they are saying the right thing.
I want to make a difference between the kind of loyal dissidents that people like myself bring to this debate, because we stand with both our feet on the right side.
Right.
Then there is dissidence that comes from corruption fighting back. Now, I don't think, again, the law of equivalence must apply to what kind of thing. Of course, we all have free speech. That's what the ANC gave South Africa after we were jailed for speaking our mind under apartheid. We gave that right, but we did not give that right. Because even our constitution, if you look at it, our constitution says, Article number 7, that we shall have absolute freedom, or we shall have freedom of expression, association, and so forth. But it is the one that says, but you shall not do hate speech, and you shall not incite to the wrong. Right. Now, I think if we understand it like that, then what was the free speech on the one side doing, and what is the free speech on the other side doing? Not all speaking to power is truth. Because you may have a fact. You can speak fact to power when you speak about pala, but it is not in the scheme of things truth to power. And we must make these nuances in our thinking as we go forward in order to understand and navigate the cacophony of not only South Africa, but also the ANC. Because there are some people who throw out facts against the president and use that. But then there's others who must speak truth to power. Okay. And that, I think, is the kind of new vocabulary that we must begin to learn as we navigate.
Okay. I wanted to hold you in the Western Cape earlier, but then we were taken by the wave over the big bluish sea. You went to this conference, I mean, as part of the Western Cape delegation, right?
No, I went as part of the Veterans League delegation.
Okay, because there was a time...
I'm now 60 and I've had 40 years of service.
Okay, you are above now the clouds, you're looking down at all this. Because, I mean, there was a time when you were premier, you had this Africanist, and there was this little man, what was this, the gentleman who was the Africanist, the Africanist, or you became a minister, deputy, what is his name again?
Look, there's a whole lot of
anyway,
I wouldn't label them, but I was up against people like Mabisi Squatcha and so forth and so forth. Yeah, I think that's the name.
Correct. So, I mean, are those people who are still holding sway in the where is the ANC in the Western Cape? Do they still exist? What do they stand for? And what is your relationship to them? Do they see you as an elder, a veteran they must listen to? Or are they just still all over the place? What do they stand for today?
Look, I think the ANC in the Western Cape is a reflection of the ANC nationally. It's also divided between RET and renewal, but fortunately in the Western Cape, because survival is so important, the renewal is overwhelming. So out of the 283 delegates that the Western Cape brought to this conference, the 55th conference, I would say that about 250 of them are absolutely committed to renewal, because in the Western Cape, they have learned the value of being free of blemishes, that every blemish is punished by the voters, free of racism, because every expression of racism is punished by the voters. And so the Western Cape has actually come to this conference as an example of what happens when you F up. And so that's been the voice of the Western Cape in this national conference, that power is tenuous. And if you lose it, you can lose it for a long, long period, as the Western Cape ANC is discovering.
I think the people, the voters in the rest of South Africa outside of the Western Cape need to learn some things from the voters in the Western Cape. I've always said that in the Western Cape, you deliver, you get supported. You don't deliver, you don't get supported. And the ANC, for the reasons we just mentioned, there has not been seen to be. I mean, at some point you had Nomba Indiam Feketo as executive mayor of Cape Town. Now she's the ambassador of South Africa. I heard some really unpleasant things about her being the ambassador of South Africa in Washington. I mean, how in the world do you choose people like that to represent our beautiful country in capitals like Washington? So the ANC has been mostly its own enemy in all of these decisions, really.
And I'm not going to comment on my successes, but when Trump got elected in the USA, because to your point, your latter point, when Trump got elected to the presidency of the USA, John Eikenberry in Foreign Affairs wrote an article, and he spoke about how great empires and we can call the ANC for its 100 years one of those. How great empires rise and fall. He says its fall is inevitable. The only question is, was it murder or suicide?
Wow.
And I think that that is the fundamental question that the ANC must ask itself.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't murdered by the voters. It
No.
certainly wasn't murdered by puny opposition parties. I think that the course of the ANC was a suicidal one.
Yeah, I think the ANC, this expression is time to eat. I mean, it doesn't,
Absolutely.
it's not always direct. So it's time for Soli to eat. It's time for so and so to eat. But Soli might not deserve to be there. I mean, I have friends in Washington who say amazing things about you. They still remember your ambassadorship there. But some people say, we can't invite this current lady to events because when she takes to the podium, we want to hide under the table. I mean, she represents South Africa in Washington. I mean, I'm sure there are others around the world who've been put in those positions because they're the child of so and so, the friend of so and so, the cousin of so and so, and you're going to be ambassador, councillor, high commissioner over there who don't. I mean, South Africa is an amazing brand, but you put people like that to represent it. You're killing the country.
So I'm not going to take even the flattery out of what you say. What I will take is the principle that a renewed and purified ANC must be purified of tendencies of nepotism, of reward for incompetence, and this despicable expression of time to eat. It is the most anti-people expression that you can find. And that is why in the million-member drive, everyone thought that to be in the ANC branch was to be guaranteed the councillorship of your ward. And that, unfortunately, has raised the stakes for the internal battle. I must be chairman of my branch or chairperson of my branch because then I will be the ward candidate for council. And it permeates it, the thinking of the current ANC, and that's the long, hard, clean sweep that we are going to require.
So the presidency had given Jacob Zuma up to yesterday, Monday, to withdraw the spurious charges that he had laid in the so-called private prosecution of President Ramaphosa. I have no idea yet if he's withdrawn them. Has he withdrawn them, and what then happens? Does it mean the president must go and defend himself?
Look, I'm not sure. I haven't heard whether any legal writ has been responded to, etc., etc. But what I do want to say is, it is an expression that the president, Ramaphosa, knows he can't negotiate every issue. There are sometimes where you've got to show your teeth. Let's take out of that whole episode that he showed his teeth, that he's put Jacob Zuma to terms, and that Jacob Zuma must respond. Again, this is going to be very, very important for us to recharacter the president into the kind of leader that South Africa needs, firstly, to clean up inside the party of the corrupt, secondly, to restore coherence and discipline by dealing with undisciplined people within the ANC, and thirdly, by systematically tackling the big utilities that I think need to start working. And again, the president stepped outside of his normal constitutional character, in which those of us who drew up that constitution believe that the army has no role to play in civilian life. The fact that we sent the army to safeguard power stations that have been targeted for sabotage, I think the fact that the army is there begins to say that maybe our recharactering of the president is working. So let's take out of it the steeliness that we see, rather than the tennis match of serve, receive, serve, receive. I think what we are saying, let's look at the character that is beginning to emerge.
The thing that worries me, I mean, I wrote soon after he became president that if Ramaphosa, the charming Ramaphosa, were to look for enemies, they are not while he would not find them on the promenade in Cape Town while he's jogging, helping, meeting, taking selfies with South Africans, like at Luthuli House. Now, I'm not sure that Zuma has been appeased, and Zuma and all the people around Zuma. I don't know where William Kaiser stands on this. Basically, the KZN and ANC, which tends to be supportive of people, NDZ is also part of those people. Are they going to allow Ramaphosa to do what he must now? And I was saying he's come out strengthened from this conference, or are they going to continue throwing stuff at him, the colony houses of this world, just to make him look bad ahead of 2024 and commit suicide? Really, if they do that, if they keep doing that, they're going to have the ANC commit suicide in 2024.
Look, for that group, 2024 is not important. Their not being free by 2024 is important. That's the stakes. No amount of appeasement. And you can say, look, you've released Janusz Valush, who murdered our icon, but you want to put Jacob Zuma in jail. False equivalence. Because Janusz Valush never subscribed to the best human values of a Mandela, a Tambo, and a Luthuli. He did what he did because it was in his nature to do what he did. A Jacob Zuma who sings Oliver Tambo and pays homage to Luthuli, he subscribed to that, and he must be judged by a completely different standard, the standard that he espouses. But now they want to be judged by the standard of a Janusz Valush. It doesn't work like that. And that is the moral clarity with which the president has to act. They will never, in America they say, turkeys don't vote for Thanksgiving because they know they will be slaughtered.
That's true.
There will be no way that the turkeys in the ANC will vote for the Thanksgiving that could be brought about if the results of this 55th conference go the right way. Whether you appease them, whether you negotiate with them, it will not work because they know at the end of the day, they are going to be taken to the slaughter.
Yeah. You have been an amazing, active participant in this conference. I mean, you've shared updates, rather. You've been there in the belly of the beast, as it were. It was all about the ANC, which is okay because this was the ANC conference. Now, if you were to now turn around, the cameras have been this side, now you have to turn around and face the people of South Africa and say something to them about the conference. What would you say to them?
I want to say to South Africans that for those who have been disenchanted, even angry with the ANC, whether you were historical foes of the ANC or historical supporters of the ANC, if you were to look at this conference, I can forgive you all kinds of cynicism, all kinds of suspicion, because you will be able to show enough flaws in the product that came out of the 55th conference. You will point to people and you will point to resolutions that you completely disagree with. I want to say to you, however, that because the country is at stake, because the future of our people is at stake, because the whole moral legacy of what South Africa means to a troubled world is at stake, people like myself, we necessarily need to find glimpses of hope. And I think that in that top 7, in a majority from the 80, we must find that hope. You must then walk with us to see whether we pass subsequent tests. I'm hoping that I will be around either inside advocating and fighting hard for it, or outside continuing to be a loyal dissident in order to hold the president to not his standard, but what the country needs. And if the country needs even him to pay for his transgressions, then that is the way in which Nelson Mandela stood in the dock in a completely different context and said, I am prepared to die for this cause and go to jail. So I think that's the kind of sacrifice that we will require for the greater good.
What comes first for you, South Africa or the ANC?
It's obviously South Africa, but at this point, the ANC has a dominant hold over the country. And therefore, in sequencing you've got to sequence the renewal and purification of the ANC as the precondition for bringing relief to South Africans and recovering the utilities and getting back onto the path of moral rectitude.
So you're basically asking South Africa to keep waiting for the ANC to get its act together, while the ANC is still messed up inside. The South Africa must keep waiting. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying South Africans have no choice. There is no party strong enough to replace the ANC. And therefore, if you look, and I don't want to reopen a conversation that is winding down, but if you look for a similar moment in the Zimbabwean history of open confession that we are corrupt, open confession that we have failed, open confession, and then move to clear, if indecisive steps towards rectitude, you will not find it in any other liberation movement.
Right.
I think this is the one glimpse of light that we have in the ANC.
Okay. So South Africa must give it another year because we have elections coming up soon.
South Africans must give their verdict in 2024. That really is the situation. We have the final exam coming up in 2024.
Yeah, I like the expression that you use, loyal dissident. I really like that. I think that the president of South Africa should give people should keep people like yourself close to him. So people who don't just say what he wants to hear. And usually this is what happens with the people who are in powerful positions. They tend to be surrounded by people, sycophants who say what the boss wants to hear. But a lot of times they become afraid for the fear of losing their jobs, like their livelihoods, to say what needs to be said. And I like you because we're able to say these things, Do you think that Ramaphosa would have coffee with you more often and listen, and you say, no, but you need to do this, you need to do it? Would he listen to you?
Look, I think we have a healthy, respectful relationship.
Okay.
He may think that I don't understand the constraints under which he works. And he may not understand that if I don't put the counter pressure on him, he will always succumb to the pressure from the wrong forces.
Okay. So, Ebrahim Rasool, is there anything that you thought I was going to ask you that I haven't asked you? What would you like to say to class?
The best thing about this conversation is being face to face with you again after a while. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you for making the time. I know that, as I said earlier, you just came back yesterday and you need a bit
I'm still up in Joburg.
Oh, you're still up in Joburg? You didn't make it?
We've been kept on another day because we are waiting the results and so forth. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, good luck with the rest. And let's hope.
Thank you very much.
Keep speaking for South Africa. The loyal dissidence that you have, I know you've demonstrated it. Do not stop.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's been my conversation with Ebrahim Rasool. As you can see, he's still in the belly of the beast in Johannesburg as the ANC wraps up its 4-day conference. We're going to come up now with the official announcement of the NEC, the National Executive Committee. These are the big bosses in the ANC who influence the direction of the ANC, the tone, and the direction, unfortunately, of South Africa. But it is what it is. Let's see what happens after this. You've been speaking to you've been listening while watching Solim Wang at WorldView, together with Ebrahim Rasool. Now, please don't stop. If you've come this way, of course, it means you love these conversations that we have on WorldView. I would like you to please continue subscribing and sharing. And those who can, and who are interested to advertise on this platform, write to us at Donald or info@world-view.co. info@world-view.co. Thank you. Bye-bye.